Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. I got a very special episode for you this time around. My first ever mid-year top 12. I felt like in the past few years, whenever I get to my top 20 at the end of the year, I always seem to misrepresent the first part of the year. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one up is 1000 Gex by 100 Gex. My boy's got his own ringtone. It's the only one I know. It's the only one I know. My boy's got his own ringtone. It's the only one I know. It's the only one I answer. When I covered 100 Gex earlier this year, I think that I didn't do the best job of representing my feelings on them. I talked a little about the collaboration and I described them pretty well as sort of this Glitter Trolls sings for Death Grips types group. But that didn't really capture, I think, what I think is so interesting about them, because the way that they almost satirize popular music, I think, is kind of important. In a way, they're kind of like the Joker of the popular music scene today. They have to exist. They're sort of an embodiment of all the things that are over the top about popular music today. And again, they take these things and they weaponize them and they use them for good, more or less, in a way, by writing amazing, catchy songs. Okay, next up I got John Anderson's 1000 Hands.
Just to be who you are makes me happy. Just to be where you are.
Now, it's no secret that I love John Anderson, and I think that one of the things I've always kind of had in the back of my mind about John Anderson is I didn't always see exactly where his genius lied besides his vocal prowess, his vocal ability. But this really does show, I think, the impressive way in which his vision holds together, because as we all know, and yes, he had a very strong role to play, but he's not really an instrumentalist. But what he is a brilliant conceptualist, and he's a really good arranger, and he's able to take all the disparate voices that are involved in this album that he's recorded and collected for these songs, and really brings them together in a way that feels almost like it has the diversity of the Yes album without ever copying that by any means. Plus, there's a side of him here that I think it's a little more carefree and definitely represents a way more coherent vision of John Anderson than I often give him credit for. Okay, next up I got Beauty Pill's Sorry You're Here. Sorry You're Here was created by Chad Clark and as the lead person of Beauty Pill as accompaniment for a dance play, and the dance play's subject was suicide. And this album actually doesn't directly deal with the suicide in a very verbal or obvious way, but definitely lingers in the background. And I really appreciate the way in which he addressed these issues so directly, but without, making things seem so overwrought and too melodramatic. Okay, next up is The Buggles, The Age of Plastic. So although I have John Anderson in this list, I also have kind of the first group that was really around that ended up subverting what Yes actually was, as The Buggles went on to become part of Yes in 1980. But previous to that, they became very famous for being the first group to ever put a song on MTV. It'd be very easy to look at this album and consider it an example of a one-hit wonder. But the album across the board has great songs, and many of them still hold up to the amazing standard that Video Killed the Radio Star has. Okay, next up I got Chassol's India More. This is the one save from December that actually made it back in the end, and I suspected that would be the case. This is a completely brilliant album in which Chassol, the composer, took a bunch of Indian field recordings of music and people talking and the sounds of the streets, the culture of India, the audio culture of India, and harmonized it and set it to music. It has a very compelling use of contemporary jazz and pop harmony that he uses to make it sound coherent. And at the same time, uses the tension and release method that we see in Western music in combination very often with the same tension and release methods you see in Indian music. So, amazing recording that has a lot of deference to the culture in which it borrows, but also shows a lot of genius from the composer in its execution. All right, next up is Cynic's Ascension Codes. With the loss of 2/3 of the dividing members of this group, one might wonder what's the point? Why would we do this? Well, of course, Matt Zavala, guitar player, has done a fantastic job of showing how Cynic is relevant, even without those key players, Sean Malone and Sean Reinhart. One of the key ways in which he does this is, rather than replacing the fantastic fretless bass player Sean Malone with another bass player. Instead, replace it with synth bass. And man, something about that really just rocks my legs every time I listen to this album. The synth bass in this is awesome. And it really makes this stand apart. It's almost not even a prog metal album at this point when you get there, but it still has its roots in that style. So I'm really fascinated by this album. I love it from a player standpoint, but also from a compositional standpoint. It does hold the candle, I think, to Trace Denier, which is kind of, you know, Cynic's, I think, defining album. Okay, next up I got Calandra's The Line. The Line was a real late player in the game this time around, but it's compelling enough to unseat some albums by groups I really thought would make it all the way to the end. It got unseated Once a Future Band, which is one of my favorite groups. But the really unique Nordic Pink Floyd style that they have on this album that they're mining, along with a great female vocals and actually very meaningful lyrics, sell this album in a way I really didn't expect. Okay, next up I got Amethyst Kaya's Wary and Strange.
She washed away, washed away, washed away.
This album kind of caught my attention from the very first listen. It's never disappointed me as I've gone through it and become more and more intimately aware of the musical nuances that are going on in the album. A fantastic recombination of Americana and folk and blues music and rock. And the thing that's able to bring all this together is a great songwriting that Amethyst Kaya exhibits on the album, and amazing melodic work that she does. Her voice is stellar, it's moving, and it's a vehicle by which she delivers these unbelievably emotive and beautiful melodies throughout the album. Next up I got Lowe's Hey What.
Consequences of leaving.
I've been following Lowe for several years, and I always kind of wonder what the next step is going to be, and they just keep on going deeper and deeper into innovative uses of distortion. And I think that Hey What's just another stop along the way. So much of this album is based on how they play with noise and silence and distortion and cleanliness and beauty and ugliness. The album just travels through all these things so effortlessly. But despite being effortless, it's often very shocking and very attention-grabbing. The vocals are what really help this to stay together, because, you know, there's parts of which you're probably completely convinced that your stereo is about to explode listening to this album. But listen closely. The vocals are still pristinely beautiful. They're clear, and they remain untouched by the distortion throughout the course of the album. They feel like they're distorted because everything around them is distorted, but those things are preserved in a very beautiful way, and the end result is unbelievably emotive and a super effective statement about what happens when you can juxtapose that kind of dirty sounds with such beautiful melodic work. Okay, next up is Mono Neon's Put on Earth for You.
I was put on earth for you, to give you flowers in a world full of gloom. I was put on earth.
Again, Mono Neon is a guy that I've been following for several years now. Last year, Superman was a really big player for me and opened up my eyes a little bit more to his more accessible side. And I think that although Put on Earth for You has some more of the more eclectic sounds on it than Superman did, it also, I think, still bows towards a more accessible aspect of Mono Neon's interests. Even the weird stuff on here is fun to listen to. And I think that, again, Mono Neon's a guy that's continually listening to himself and continually improving, so I'm really interested in seeing how this arc continues in his playing, how he's able to make things sound unique and eclectic and avant-garde, but still really nail the aspect of this that makes it fun to listen to. Okay, next up is Neria's Bloom. Bloom is the album that made me fall back in love with contemporary jazz by itself this last year. Again, a largely female ensemble, which is unusual in jazz, not without precedent, but unusual. Making great compositions and lots of fantastic soloing throughout. Also still has its roots in traditional jazz, but sounds very contemporary, especially in terms of being a piano-less group where the rhythm section is bass, drum, and guitar. The guitar player kind of bleeds over into some almost post-rock sounding guitar sounds, and that brings it to a more contemporary framework. But again, it's the playing and the composition that make this such an arresting recording. And finally, Soccer Mommy's Color Theory.
There's a pale girl staring through the mirror at me. Maybe it's just a dream.
Color Theory was suggested to me by a friend at the end of last year and has ended up being a really, really big player for me throughout this entire last few months. Just like many of the albums from this particular post, it's the melodies in this album that really get me. Musically, it's got this beautiful melancholic delivery, and this melancholy often has very dark underpinnings to it. But it's juxtaposed again by this beautiful, flowing, dreamlike atmospheres throughout the course of these tracks in this album. And I think it's now that many people will be able to connect with, given the chance and the exposure. So there it is. Go out and check that one out, and as well as the rest of them. Check out all these albums. I've had so much great music this year. If you go back and listen to my old roundups for all these albums, 40, 50 albums that I've lived throughout this last 4 or 5 months, many of them are things that I love. I'm very open and accepting of a lot of the music that I listen to, but these ones stood out. And I want to make sure that we catch these now, and we'll show them again at the end of the year, and see how they size up in the top 20. So, thank you so much for checking this out. I'm going to continue starting back up next week with a few more eliminations and getting back into that. If you want to follow those, please look at that over on my blog. If you want to know when more videos are going to happen, please like and subscribe and share this video out with your friends, and follow me over on Spotify. I'm putting tracks up from all these albums on a master playlist for you to check out at your leisure. So I hope that you'll do that. And until I see you next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.
Words on the back of them. What's down about that? Princeton, and who on the night of October